Hello everyone, this is Stephanie. Welcome to another video. So I'm excited to share with you the bracelet that I showed you during the unboxing of the Emerging Spring Light collection. And for those of you who purchased the collections, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. You guys are so wonderful, so thank you so much. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Light collections, they're a smaller, more focused, scaled down version of Eureka Crystal Beads past collections, as well as brand new, even more theme oriented collections. So check those out. I'll put a link in the description box below the video. I think the collection is still available, but today we're going to focus on this. And as usual, you don't have to have the collection to make this. These are beads that that if you follow me, that we always have in our stash anyway. All right, so let's get started. Just a note for during the tutorial, we're going to start with bezeling these stones, and then we're going to connect the stones, and then we're going to make the band. And when you make the band, I'm not going to do a new tutorial on the band. I'm going to give you a link to my tutorial where I show you how to make this band, and it's it's really detailed. So you'll just click that link, you'll make the band, and then you'll come back, we'll attach the band, because these pieces will already be attached. We'll attach the band, and we'll attach the clasp. You'll put the little delicas down the center. All right, so let's get started. Let's get the materials list going. So you'll need 2 colors of delicas, and everything I'm using is from the Light Emerging Spring Light collection, except for 4mm jump rings. So you'll need 2 delicas, 2 different colors, if you want to do 2 different colors. I've got a 3mm Druck bead. This is that hazelnut, and this is, of course, the blue and the cream. I've got the 13 by 18 millimeter pear fancy stone, which is so gorgeous. I've already have this one bezeled. I've got 2 10 by 14 millimeter pear fancy stones. I've got a 15-0 and 11-0 stop bead. This beautiful gleam craft clasp, the hammered clasp. I just adore this one. I've got several sizes of beading needles and some pins. I always like to keep pins around, and I keep on this little puff. And then I have Fireline thermally fused tough in smoke, 6 pound, and I've been running it through just a regular tissue before I use it, and that seems to help it from, keep it from the color from coming off of my hands, which is great. Okay, so I think that's everything. I'll list everything in the description box below the video. Go through your stash. If you want different colors, you can purchase this collection. I think it's still available, or you can purchase the items separately as well. They have them all listed. So check out the description box for that, for sizes, shapes, colors, everything you need. All right, so let's get started. Start with the bezels. So this bezel is going to be exactly the same for both stones. So the sequence of beads, the only thing that changes is the starting number of delicas. So you're going to start with 38 for the largest stone and 30 for the smaller stone, and of course you're going to make 2 smaller stones. So everything is the same except the starting number. I'm going to be doing this one on camera, and then you can go back and do the 2 smaller ones, after we're done with that. So just rewind and follow the same steps. Just start with the proper number for the smaller stone. Okay, so we're going to bezel the stones, and the bezel is exactly the same for each stone, only the starting number is different. So for the larger stone, we're going to start with 38 delicas, and I've alternated them with blue, cream, and for the 10 by 14 stone, you're going to add 30 delicas. So that's the only difference. It's going to be the same. Sew them into a circle by sewing through the first bead after my stop bead, which is this blue one. So this is what I have. So now we're going to do our standard peyote bezel, and I just love how pretty and clean it is. I just love it, peyote bezel. So we're exiting the blue. We've made our circle. Now we're going to pick up the cream color, and I'm exiting the blue. I'm going to skip the next cream, and I'm going to sew through the next blue bead. Put your thumb on it. Give it a little pull. It should pop up on that previous cream bead. So we're just going to do this all the way around. We're going to pick up the cream and exiting the blue, skipping the cream one, sewing through the next blue one. And that's what's so nice about alternating, is once you get started, you know that each time for this round, you're going to just be picking up a cream bead and sewing through the blue bead. Then a pull, And if they don't pop over, push them over with your thumb. So just like that. So you're going to continue that all the way around, putting your cream beads on, and then we'll step up. Okay, I'm on my last bead, and we're going to step up here. So I've put this delica on, came through the blue one, picking up my last cream delica. I'm going to skip the cream one. I'm going to sew through this blue one, and then that cream bead on the diagonal, and that's going to set me up to put some more beads on. So just like that. Another round. So we're gonna pick up the blue bead, because I want a blue bead on top of the blue beads. So I'm exiting the cream, picking up my blue, sewing through the next sticking out bead. It's the easy part, just sewing through the next sticking out bead, picking up my blue bead, sewing through the next sticking out bead. Or whatever color you're using, you're just picking up a bead, sewing through the next sticking out bead or up bead. Just like that. As I go around, I'm just kind of putting my thumb there, and I'm just going to give a little pull inward, just so it starts to curve a little bit. See that? It doesn't have to be crazy. Just sort of help it along a little bit, and then I'll meet you at the end and we'll step up. Okay, it's time to step up. So here's my last blue bead. I'm exiting the cream. I'm going to sew through the next sticking out bead, which would be the cream one, right here. And then the blue one on the diagonal. Just have it on my finger just because it's easier for me to hold. So just like that. So here you go. This is what we have so far. We're exiting that delica, the blue delica. You know, we stepped up. Now we're going to put on 15-0. So exiting this delica, I'm going to just pick up a 15-0 and sew through the next sticking out bead or up bead. So here we go, another 15-0 through the next up bead. And you're just going to keep doing that until you have, I'd say, about 8 of your 15-0s on. And then we'll do a little decrease. I have about 8 15-0s on. And now I'm just going to, instead of putting a 15-0 here, I'm just going to, without any beads on my needle, I'm just going to sew through the next sticking out or up bead. Like that, and that just that little bit of a decrease is going to give me room for the point of my stone. And then after that, I'm just going to continue on putting on my 15-0. So you see what that does? It's going to give me a little point there. So continue on with your 15-0s, and I'll meet you at the end, and we'll step down to the end. And we're going to put our last 15-0 on of this round. So 15-0, exiting here, I'm going to sew through the next bead, which is the blue delica, and then the 15-0 on the diagonal right there. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Let's put another round on. So we're going to pick up a 15-0. I'm going to sew, exiting this 15-0, I'm going to sew through the next 15-0. And you're going to do that all the way around. And I'll come back when we get to the point to show you how to do the point. Okay, so I'm coming up to the point. I have one more bead to put on before I get to that where I did the decrease. So just like that. And then I'm just going to continue just putting one bead on. So I'm going to go from this 15-0 to this 15-0. So just pop over like that. Just the next sticking out bead, which is that 15-0, and that's just going to, fill in the point there. And then we're going to continue on, just putting 15-0s on, and then we're going to step up at the end. Getting close to stepping up, so here I'm going to put this 15-0 on, and then I'm going to pick up my last 15-0, and I'm going to, sitting here, I'm going to sew through the next 15-0, and then the 15-0 on the diagonal to step up. So just like that. This is what we have so far. So this is going to be the back. So I'm going to turn my piece around and thread my needle, and you'll be exiting an interior delica here. You just want to get your thread to the outside so you can put beads on. So I'm just going to go on the diagonal and sew through this green bead right here. So it looks like, so I'm going to put my stone in, I'm going to put it face up like this. I'm just going to look on this side and make sure it's sort of the point is in the vicinity of this area here. You can put the stone in. I guess you can put it in face down and make this the back, but I kind of like finishing the front. I think with the original video, I put the stone face down, but I'm putting it face up this time. Okay, so there we go. We're exiting a delica, and you could always, this can always be moved a little bit if you're not exactly right there. So here we are. Pick up 15 O's, and I'm going to sew through each sticking out or up bead, just like so. So you're just going to continue this all the way around. When you get up to the point, you know, you're just going to just keep adding those beads. And I just kind of adjusted my point a little bit so that it's in line. I think I'm going to be in line, sort of in line with this delica here. And like I said, it's going to move around a little bit. You can always, you know, play with it a little bit, really anytime to make sure everything is perfect. So I'm just going to keep going around. It's not going to, the stone isn't going to stay in right now. It's just, you know, you just hold your thumb to worry about it. So just go all the way around and then we'll step up. So I'm picking up my last 15 over this round, exiting this delica. I'm going to sew through the next delica and then the 15 on the diagonal. And then I'm going to put another round on. Pick up a 15 and just sew through the next sticking out bead, which is the next 15 and you're just going to continue this all the way around. So just like that. When you get to the point, you're just going to continue, just going all the way around. You're not going to do anything different here. So just continue going all the way around. Okay, let's step up. So we have our last bead on, exiting the 15 I'm going to sew through this 15 and the one on the diagonal. So just like that. So now you have this bezel is done. If you feel like you need maybe another round on the back, you can put another round on. But I think that, you know, I think mine's pretty sturdy, and I like that there's a lot of the stone showing. Here we are, we're all done, and we're at, you know, with the bezel, and I love that there's a lot of the stone showing. It's funny how, depending on, I guess, your tension and such, how maybe more of the stone is showing on one than the other. They're always different. Anyway, so here we're exiting, we've just stepped up, we're exiting this 15 right here. So I just want you to move this thread through this next 15 through this delica. We're going to move this thread over and we're going to use it. And then, did you hear my stomach? I'm a little hungry. Through this delica. And then through this one. So you want to be exiting this delica right here. So you're exiting this cream color delica. So it's the delica before the last row of delica. So the one row up. Now we're going to do a little stitch in the ditch. So we're going to pick up an 11 exiting here. We're just going to sew through the next one. So the next delica, the next white delica or cream delica. So here, just go on a line. So through the next one. Again, so through the next one. So you're just going to do that all the way around. So we're coming to where the point is. So I want to just do a little bit of a turn here, or a little bit of a adjustment here. So I'm exiting this delica here. So picking up my 11 sewing through this one. So nothing's changing yet. Picking up on 11 I'm going to sew through this one. So these are the ones that are at the point, right? Just like that. And then before I go on, I'm going to sew through this one. This is going to sort of pull the point together, just without any beads on my thread. So through that delica, and then back through this delica, like that. And that's just going to pull them together just a little bit. And then I'm going to continue on with my 11 O's. like so. And so you're just going to continue doing that all the way around until you have all your stitch in the ditch on. Okay, coming down to the end of my last few stitch in the ditch beads. So here I'm going to add this one on. I'm just going to actually turn it on the back. I think it's easier to see. So here I've added that one, and now is my last one. I'm going to sew right through that original delica that I started with. So now I have them all on. Now I want you to sew this thread in really well. So I'm exiting the delica, this cream one. I'm going to sew through this delica. So I'm going to come on the diagonal. Then you could sew through this 15-0 and then sew through this delica. I want you to really reinforce this well because we're going to be attaching the band to these beads. And while we'll also attach the band, you know, a bit to the bezel, I just want to make sure that it's super, super tight. So here I'm going to, exiting this, I'm just sewing in now. So exiting the blue one, I'm going to actually pop through to this one, this delica. This is just to tighten it up, you know, and to just make sure it's nice and secure. So when I'm exiting that one right there, I'm going to reverse direction and go through the one that's right next to it. And then I'm going to reverse direction again and go through that cream one that I was coming out of. So let me see. There we go. You see that? And that's going to lock it into place. And then you can continue on a little bit, just, you know, until you feel it's nice and secure. So I'm feeling that's pretty good. That clear up a little bit. Sorry that my lights are a bit off. So this is what it looks like. So you're just going to sew this thread in. If you have a tail thread, sew that in, and then we'll continue. Okay, let's sew a couple of pieces together. So I've taken the small piece. This is how I'm putting it together. I really eyeballed this one. I didn't count any beads, but I'll see if I can get some kind of count for you and see if it works. Because, you know, things, you know, depending on how tight your tension is or loose, you know, the beads can be in slightly different places. So I think you'll all have 3, like a center bead from here when you put your needle here. So the center bead on the round edge of the small one is there. So I'm going to use the 2 on the other side on that center bead. So those 3 right there. And then the center bead on this one is right there. So I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to start on this 3rd bead of the round part of the larger bezel. So I found my center, counted 1, 2, 3. And I'm just going to thread a needle, about 1.5 feet of thread, put on a stop bead, leave a tail to sew in. And I'm going to just sew through, from here, through this bead right here. So I think it's easiest rather than, you know, to talk you through it because then you can see the thread path. So you're exiting this bead. You're going to sew through, so you've sewn through this bead, you're exiting here, you're going to come around and sew through that 3rd bead of that little group of 3 there, and then up, through that one, through this next one on the larger one, through the next one on the smaller one, through the next one on the larger one, down and around, next one on the smaller one, and out here. So you're using these 3 beads and 1, 2, 3, these 4 beads on the larger one. And we've figured everything out by finding that center 11-0 on each unit. Or you can just eyeball it and see how it goes. Okay, this is where we are so far. So we're exiting here. Pull in a bit. So exiting this bead right here. I'm just going to pick up an 11-0 and I'm going to go back. I'm going to sew through this bead right here. This is what it looks like, keeping it loose so that you can see what I'm doing, but you'll be tightening yours as you go along. So we're exiting here now. We're just going to retrace our steps till we get to the other end. So through this one. And then through this one. So you're not making any new thread paths, you're using the same thread path. Like that. And then through this one. then through this one. So you're going to stop right there. So we've added a bead on this side, and we've just retraced our steps until we're exiting here. Okay, so I pulled it tight, and this is what it looks like so far. So we have this little bead we added here. We're going to do the same thing on this side. So we're just going to pick up this an 11-0, and I'm going to sew through this one. It's going to place that bead right there. And then I'm going to retrace my steps again. I'll just do a little faster this time. So, you know, just going to go through all the beads. Just don't make a new thread path. I'm just doing 2 at a time right now. Get through this one. So you're just going back and forth, which is really good for the piece anyway, because you want to make it nice and tight. So you're just going to be exiting right there. And just, you know, pull your tail thread as well, because you want to make sure that everything is nice and tight. Okay, so we're exiting right here. So I just want you to come around again. So we're just going to come, just without any beads on our needle, I'm just sewing through several beads at once. I'm just going to come through the beads again. You know, remember, you're not making a new thread path. You're just sort of sewing on the diagonal, right? Just want to secure that last bead a little bit. This one. Then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm just going to go back. So I know it's, you know, you can change to a size 12 beading needle if you want here, but I just think doing it a couple of times really tightens it up. So just keep coming down your beads. I'm still using a size 10 beading needle, but you know. Just make sure you're going through the right bead. There we go. Gonna pop through this one. So now we just did a couple of passes just to sort of make that nice and snug, and then you want to pull your, you know, your threads, and this is what it's going to look like. So, you know, I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks fine, and I'm just going to repeat that on the other side. I did a little, let's see, I put a little pearl right here. I guess we could do that. So let me go grab a pearl, and we'll do that as well. If you want to add the pearl, you're exiting the bottom bead here. You're just going to go back up these 3. So I'm just, you know, sort of going back up to the first 3 beads like that. Then I'm going to pick up, I don't know, should we add a 15-0 before the pearl? Or the round bead? Every time I see a round bead, I call it a pearl. So let me grab a 15-0. Got one here. Every time I kind of change things in the middle, I regret it. But let's see, 15-0 pearl. 15-0, so I'm exiting here. So I'm just going to hop over to this one. You know, I'm going to go through these 3, but I think I need to change my needle size. So here. So let's see if the 15-0 makes a difference. No, I don't think you need the 15-0. So let me go take that off, and we'll do it without that. I took off the 15-0s. So we're exiting. Remember, we went through these 3. I'm going to just pick up just the round bead and then sew through the last 3 on that side. And let me see, how did that work? Yeah, it's kind of better. Actually, I don't even know if you need that. What do you think? I mean, I think it looked really pretty without it. So it's up to you if you want to put that on. So this is where we are. We just want to get these threads properly sewn in now. Okay, let's attach our band to the bezel. So I've threaded a needle with about 1.5 feet of thread. I put on a stop bead. I left enough of a tail to sew in. So I've sewn through. So I'm going to use these 2 delicas on the bezel. So these 2 white ones right here. So there are 3 at the point. This one and this one. Those are the 2 I'm going to use. So I've sewn through this white one. I've come around and I've sewn through the first 11 on the band. I added a delica, and then I went through the next 11 on the band. So through this one, through the first one on the band, add a delica, so through the next 11 and then back up here through this delica. So this is my thread path. Remember, you have to add that little delica in between there. Okay, so I'm going to turn it to the side, and you can pull this tight at this point. So I'm turning it over to the side. I'm exiting this delica here. I'm going to sew through this bead right here. Like that. So I'm on the side here. I'll be exiting this bead right here onto the back. I'm trying to keep the thread path open for you, but it's kind of difficult. So I'm exiting this guy back here, and then I'm going to sew through this first 11 right here. And then I'm going to sew through the point bead on the bezel. And then I'm going to sew through the 11 here, just going around like that. I'm going to turn it this way, and I'm going to sew through this one like that. And then we're going to sew through this delica on the bezel. And then after you've gone through that one, you're going to sew through the first 3 on the top. So the 11 delica 11 like that. And then give it a little pull. I thread a little bit. So I'm exiting this 11 here. I'm going to go through this delica again like that. I'm going to go on the side, and I'm going to sew through this 15 like that. Stay with me. This 11 right there. I'm going to sew through this 11 I'm going to sew through this 11 right here. And then I'm going to sew down through this 11. Okay, so now you're fully attached. You can give your tail thread a little pull. Give this a little pull. You can sew that tail thread in if you like, but you're all ready to go here, and you'll be exiting this 11 right here. Delicas, so I'm exiting here. I'm going to put a delica right here. And then I'm just going to work my way to that next space. There. There. I'm going to pick up a delica. I'm going to sew through this one. You're just going to continue going around, adding delicas to that middle space until you have all delicas on to the end, and then you can sew in your threads. Clasp. So I've already done it on this side. So what you're going to do is add your jump ring to just one jump ring to the ring of your toggle, and then to the toggle bar I added 3, just to give, you need some space to get through the ring. So 3, you can add 5, but you always want to make sure that the last one that's going to attach to your bracelet is facing this direction, so you can put beads on this way. Okay, so I'm starting on the back, and I've threaded a needle with about 1.5 feet of thread, put on a stop bead. I left a tail to sew in. I've just sewn through. They have these 2 beads on the back at the end of my my band here. So I've sewn through this one. I'm going to pick up an 11 a delica, whichever you like. I'm going to put a delica there because you can see it really well. So just like that. Then I'm going to pick up, what did I pick up here? Let's see. I picked up 2 11 and I came through the ring on the toggle bar. Move that out of the way. So, tangled here. so like this. And then I'm going to pick up 2 11-ohs, and I'm going to sew back through these 3. So like that. And then I'm going to turn it to the side and sew through this side bead. And you'll reinforce everything in a little bit. And then I'm going to turn it on the front. Then a little pull. I want those that ring to sit in between the 2 middle beads here, you know, of the 4 that you put on. So I've come through this bead here. I'm going to sew through these 3. So we're on the front now. And I'm going to pick up a 3 millimeter round bead and an 11-oh. And I'm going to sew through the ring. And then I'm going to pick up an 11-oh and a 3 millimeter. And I'm going to sew back through these 3. So essentially you have your clasp on now, but you want to go back and reinforce everything. So get you started. You're exiting the 3 on the top, coming back around through this side bead, through these 3, up, these 2 through the ring, back down through the 2 on the side, back through the 3. You got it. Got my tail thread caught a little bit, turning it over, sewing through the 11-oh, through these 3. Okay, I've come up through, so from here I just came up through these 3, and then I'm going to add an 11-oh here. So exiting those 3 is just going to secure it a little bit more. I'm going to sew through this, the pearl or the round bead, the 11-oh, the ring, the 11-oh, back through the round bead, picking up an 11-oh, sewing back through these 3. Could have added that 11-oh earlier. I just totally forgot. So now we have the 11-ohs on there, and then you're just going to, I would sew in this direction, so I would go through this one, and then I'd sew down through this group, and I'd sew all my threads in along the face of the band. And actually, if you do that all the way down, it'll really straighten everything out and it'll look beautiful. So anyway, here you go. This is what it looks like. Okay, we're back and we're done, and I thought I'd just pop it on so you could see what it looks like on the wrist. It just fits so nicely. I just really love it. I think, you know, it's very simple, but sometimes simple is just, you know, just kind of elegant, right? I mean, I love designing really intricate, complicated pieces, but sometimes you just take a couple of stitches and you can make something beautiful. All right, so I hope you love it as much as I do. I hope you make it and post it on Facebook in all different colors as well. That would be cool. I'd love to see this in red and greens, and, you know, maybe like a fuchsia pink would be so gorgeous. All right, so take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.